Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Joker Rogers in Lagos. A teenage girl has been rescued from the earthquake rubble in Turkey's southern Kahramanmaraş province more than 10 days after the disaster. Video footage shows rescue workers surrounding the 17-year-old before she was covered in a gold thermal blanket and carried away. So far, more than 43,000 people have been killed in the country and neighboring Syria. Meanwhile, a Turkish military ship has been transformed into a makeshift hospital as the country's medical infrastructure struggles with demand from those injured in the disaster. Patients were seen filing through the ship's cargo door for treatment. Young children occupied military-style camp beds while their fluids were topped up by intravenous drips. Some patients were also seen with visible physical injuries. Millions are in need of humanitarian aid after being left homeless and without basic amenities following the disaster. And NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has taken a survey of the devastation caused by the deadly earthquakes in the Turkish port city of Iskenderun during a flight with Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar. Earlier in the day, Mr. Stoltenberg visited Ankara, where he met Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu, where he conveyed his deep condolences and a message of solidarity towards the Turkish people and all those affected by the earthquakes. Mr. Stoltenberg also emphasized that NATO would be setting up temporary housing in Hatay province and would use Allied strategic airlift capabilities to transport thousands of tents to Turkey in the coming days and weeks. And to reduce the psychological burden on children, Disaster and Emergency Management Authority workers organized entertainment activities for children at a camp for the earthquake survivors. The event included fun activities such as face painting and sports.
With whiskers and colorful cat ears painted on their faces, Turkish children were given a moment of joy and normality, taking their minds off the traumatic memories of last week's devastating earthquake. Ahmet Hasim Atale is one of the social workers who arrived in the camp 2 days after the earthquake and has provided psychosocial support to children and adult survivors.
2 days after the earthquake, we are here as a psychosocial support team. Our teammates work as psychologists and social workers. Here we provide psychological support to children after the earthquake. It makes the children feel better. We have been here for a week, and all the humanitarian camps have this kind of psychosocial support. We may continue this for up to a year.
Many Turkish children were left homeless by the massive tremor that struck Turkey and Syria last week. They have been learning to cope with what happened and with their ongoing anxiety.
I can't remember being this scared in all my life. We were terrified during the earthquake. Everyone is giving medicine here. We are very happy. I feel good. I don't ever want to leave here.
Turkish authorities say at least 38,044 people have been killed in the country. The Syrian government and the United Nations say more than 5,800 people have died there. The earthquakes destroyed or heavily damaged more than 41,000 buildings across 10 of Turkey's 81 provinces.
Two other stories now. China's foreign ministry has called on the United States to work with Beijing on the balloon incident, which has further strained relations between the two countries. The foreign ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said the U.S. side cannot seek simultaneously communication and dialogue while at the same time spreading conflicting lies and escalating the crisis, but rather it should start by meeting China halfway to manage differences and properly handle the unexpected incident. While the United States President Joe Biden said he expects to speak with China's President Xi Jinping about what the United States says was a Chinese spy balloon that a U.S. fighter jet shot down early this month after it transited the United States. Mr. Biden, in his most extensive remarks about the Chinese balloon and the 3 unidentified objects downed by U.S. fighters, did not say when he would speak with President Xi, but said the United States was continuing to engage diplomatically with China on the issue.
As I've said since the beginning of my administration, we seek competition, not conflict with China. We're not looking for a new Cold War, but I make no apologies, and we will compete. And we'll responsibly manage that competition so that it doesn't veer into conflict. This episode underscores the importance of maintaining open lines of communication between our diplomats and our military professionals. Our diplomats will be engaging further, and I will remain in communication with President Xi. We are going to keep our allies and the Congress contemporaneously informed of all we know and all we learn. And I expect to be speaking with President Xi, and I hope we are going to get to the bottom of this. But I make no apologies for taking down that balloon. Last week, in the immediate aftermath of the incursion by China's high-altitude balloon, our military, through the North American Aerospace Defense Command, so-called NORAD, closely scrutinized our airspace, including enhancing our radar to pick up more slow-moving objects above our country, around the world. In doing so, they tracked 3 unidentified objects, one in Alaska, Canada, and over Lake Huron in the Midwest. They acted in accordance with established parameters for determining how to deal with unidentified aerial objects in U.S. airspace. At their recommendation, I gave the order to take down these 3 objects due to hazards to civilian commercial air traffic and because we could not rule out the surveillance risk of sensitive facilities. We acted in consultation with the Canadian government. I spoke personally with Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada on Saturday. And just as critically, we acted out of an abundance of caution and an opportunity that allowed us to take down these objects safely.
Well, let's get more on this issue. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, joins us now to take us through it. Hello, Maria. Could you give us an update on the Chinese spy balloon incident? We understand that the U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to speak with the Chinese president. We don't know when, but anytime soon, I believe.
Yes, we would expect this conversation to happen within the week. Obviously, when those balloons were taken down, they were intentionally oftentimes taken down over an area that was a large body of water. And that was to ensure that they were able to collect all of the materials that were a part of those balloons. And they are now obviously in labs across the country being investigated and looking to see exactly what was entailed in those spy balloons. Now, he's also stated that there could have been weather monitoring balloons. They could have also been part of research projects. And so not 100% sure as to the full scope of what these balloons were intended to do. But we can expect, as we know, there has been quite a bit of contention and challenge, unfortunately, between the U.S. and China over the past few years. And so he will definitely be using this as an opportunity to speak with the president of China and to obviously look at ways to further the foreign relations between the two countries.
Yes, Mr. Biden did say that he would speak with him to, kind of maybe lessen the pressure. But how much more strain do you think, this could put on the relationship between China and the U.S.?
Well, the president has stated that he doesn't foresee this putting any type of different relationship in place. This will not necessarily change what already exists. We already know that the U.S. and China have not seen eye to eye in some areas over the past few years. It's even predates the Biden administration. But I think this will give them an opportunity to talk through some of not only this challenge, but other challenges that exist. As we know, there has been a power struggle between the U.S. and China for several years now. And I think that continues as we look at these what are anticipated to be Chinese spy balloons. And so I think that definitely by this time next week, we should have feedback as to what the conversation was between the two presidents, and it should definitely be scheduled by that time as well.
Right. So do we have, what kind of investigations are going into this? What information? It could be something of national security, but do you have any information of, what could inform, the conversation that could happen between President Biden and his Chinese counterpart?
Well, what we know is that they have, whether they're researchers, military personnel that have taken these items to laboratories. And so it's pretty guaranteed that President Biden will have information and intel as to exactly what was incorporated in those balloons. Likely the public will not know, to your point of national security. Because even if it's found that it's nothing that could have been spy, from China, I think there's still evidence there, or potentially evidence there, that the U.S. could be concerned about releasing due to other risk with other nations across the world. And so I think we will not find out exactly what was entailed in those until we have a full investigation is complete and until all the security measures have been taken into account.
Right, Maria, thank you for giving us much more information on that incident today.
Thank you.
And coming up after the break, get your dancing shoes ready as Opera Ball in Vienna returns after the coronavirus break. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he would deploy Royal Canadian Navy vessels in the coming weeks to conduct surveillance, gather intelligence, and maintain a maritime presence off the coast of Haiti. Canada, which this month deployed surveillance aircraft to Haiti, has also sent armored vehicles and security gear to support anti-gang efforts, and said it would make an additional delivery of vehicles in the coming days.
Today, I am announcing that Canada will also deploy Royal Canadian Navy vessels to conduct surveillance, gather intelligence, and maintain a maritime presence off the Haitian coast in the coming weeks.
Well, the German government held a refugee summit this week in a bid to address the country's main migration challenges as local authorities struggle to cope with a high number of asylum seekers and migrants. Well, joining us to tell us more is DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu in Berlin. Hello, Chiponda. What are the biggest challenges Germany faces coping with a high number of refugees?
The number of people coming to Germany to seek refuge has been increasing in recent years, and it's been increasing constantly. And in terms of 2022, we saw from Ukraine alone more than 1 million people seeking refuge here in Germany. And on top of that, there were more than 200,000 first-time asylum seekers from countries like Syria, Iraq, Turkey, and Afghanistan. So that is putting a lot of pressure on the authorities here in Germany. It's not just a question of processing those applications, it's a question of being able to accommodate the people who are seeking refuge, and putting them up in temporary, accommodation has been the solution. And we're talking about temporary accommodation in the form of tents, people, having to stay in shelters in the form of sports halls, which have been turned into shelters, and also on top of that, also container facilities which are refurbished to house people. So it is desperate times for authorities right now. They really have trouble accommodating the new arrivals, and of course getting them into schools or giving them language lessons. They're just overstretched. That is what they said. And it's just not a question of just money alone. It is a question of resources. There are not enough resources at this point to cope with the high number of arrivals of people seeking refuge in Germany.
With such a problem, what does Germany plan to do now?
Well, in terms of what Germany is planning, at the EU level, what they're planning is to speak with their EU peers about getting a more fair distribution of Ukrainian refugees. When we look at Ukraine, there were more than 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees who went to the neighboring country, Poland, and more than 1 million coming here to Germany, whereas Spain, which is a fairly big EU economy, only got 150,000. That is a huge difference. And Germany wants to talk about, of course, getting a fair, more equal distribution of Ukrainian refugees. That's one thing. At the national level, Germany wants to have better coordination across the federal level, the state level, and of course the local level. So making sure these different authorities are collaborating, working together, and finding ways of making sure that the process of processing refugees is streamlined. And to do that, they want to have a dashboard that will show information also in terms of where there's how many refugees there are in which part of the country, so that they can also try to figure out how to distribute them and make sure that not one part of the country is, taking a large part of the burden, processing refugees or accommodating them. So that's one thing. More coordination at the national level, but of course also working with the EU partners to come up with a better system and way of coping with migration.
I know there's a lot of pressure on resources. What do ordinary Germans think of the ongoing challenges related to migration?
Well, ordinary Germans are not too happy with how the current coalition government is dealing with migration. And there was a fairly recent poll towards the end of last year, which showed that just about half of ordinary Germans, they want to see migration rules stricter and restricted. That is one example. And we've seen the result of that in the latest state elections here in Berlin, where the party that has a tougher stance against migration, the Christian Democrats, they came out ahead of all the parties that are in the coalition government, which actually experienced losses. So they had about 28% of the vote, whereas the other parties, they lost in terms of the vote here in Berlin. So that was a clear signal of how ordinary Germans are seeing the issue of migration. However, it is also important to say that Germans are in favor of skilled migration, so professionals coming to Germany. And in terms of skilled migration and skilled migrants, about half of Germans want to see rules actually made easier to, welcome professionals to Germany. So there is a bit of a difference there. They do see the nuance, and what they want to see tougher rules against is unregulated migration. And of course, because of course they're also seeing what communities and local authorities are experiencing in housing refugees or trying to give, make sure that children have enough school places. Those are issues that Germans are seeing on a daily basis. So they see the difference. And that's why we have this difference between unregulated migration as opposed to skilled migration.
Respondent Chiponda Chimbelu, thank you for your time today. Let's move on the program. The death toll from Cyclone Gabrielle has risen to 7 today. And New Zealanders have been told the numbers was likely to rise because emergency services have not yet made contact with hundreds of communities. The cyclone, which hit New Zealand on the uppermost region of the North Island last week before making its way down the country's east coast, cut off entire towns, washed away farms, bridges and livestock, and inundated homes, stranding people on rooftops. A massive blaze that ripped through an oil factory in Ashburn during the early hours of Friday has been brought under control. Ashburn police reported that a fire erupted at the factory at about 3:30 a.m. and quickly gained traction, engulfing a residential building, printing press, warehouses, and several cars. The blaze was brought under control by firefighters of the Civil Defense with support teams from Dubai, Sharjah and Al-Quwain. A video shared by police shows flames raging high and amid massive plumes of smoke as firefighters battle it to bring it under control. And more from Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged filmmakers to take sides in what he termed a battle between freedom and tyranny, drawing a parallel in his speech opening at the Berlin Film Festival between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the Berlin Wall. Mr. Zelensky recalled his own experience as an actor, urging colleagues to break the fourth wall by directly addressing their audiences. Now in its 73rd year, the Berlinale owes its reputation as the most political of the main film festivals to its origins as a divided city on the front lines of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West. This year's festival will include a focus on pro-democracy protests in Iran as well as the conflict in Ukraine.
In preparing for this address, I remembered a phrase that you are all well familiar with: break the fourth wall. And for many years, Potsdam Square was cut through by the Berlin Wall. Formerly, it divided West and East Berlin. It divided free world. Today, Russia wants to build the same wall in Ukraine, a wall between us and Europe, to separate Ukraine from its own choice and its own future. A wall between freedom and slavery, between the right to life and missile attacks, between progress, culture, and cinema can be outside of politics, but not when it is a policy of aggression. Not when it is a policy of mass crimes, murders, terror, the desire to destroy other countries and other peoples, when it is a policy of total war. That is the politics of today's Russia. Culture makes choices in times like this. Culture chooses the side or speaks out in different ways, fighting and standing against the evil, or overlooks and remains silent and in fact helping the evil.
And finally, on the program, after 2 years of coronavirus-related restrictions, the debutante pairs finally had a chance to waltz around the Vienna State Opera during the 65th Annual Opera Ball. The glamorous gala, featuring opera and ballet performances, marked a return to normal after the pandemic years and helped raise funds for Austrians in need through the initiative Austria Helps Austria. The first ball, known as the Opera Ball, was held in 1935. There have been a few disruptions since then, but since 1956, the official Vienna State Opera Ball has only been cancelled 3 times: in 1991 due to the Gulf War, and in 2021 and 2022 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Normalcy resumes. Well, that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jackie Rogers.